Hello, and thank you for joining me for this quick webinar about ways you could implement yoga for classrooms at your school at tier one. When we say tier one, we mean ways we can implement this school wide where everyone gets it. Tier one is that preventative approach where we give everyone the tools they need and hope they're successful. Now, we know some students are going to need more intensive supports. That's what tier two and tier three are for. And we'll talk about that in an upcoming video. But today we're here to talk about implementing yoga for classrooms for everyone school wide. So, a couple things we want to talk about. First and foremost, ideally, our teachers are implementing this in their classrooms. It's called yoga for classrooms, after all. We want all teachers implementing this throughout the day. The Yoga for Classrooms activity cards were designed to be easy to implement short mindful moments that can just take a couple of minutes to help reset, to help regulate, and to help students to be successful in the classroom and beyond. So, because yoga for classrooms is ideally implemented in the classroom by all teachers, let's talk about some times of the day it could be implemented in the classroom. One of my favorites is during morning meetings. In fact, I did a whole video about how to implement yoga for classrooms during morning meeting. So check it out if you haven't already. Yoga for classrooms fits beautifully into morning meetings. If you're already doing it, it means you don't have to add anything new. You can just start implementing some of the yoga for classroom activities into what you're already doing. I also know some teachers can have a hard time planning for morning meetings. If you do it every single day, it can seem a little daunting. So, again, the yoga for classrooms activity cards make it easy and seamless to and just to add into that morning meeting that you're already doing. Another great time to implement yoga for the classrooms in the classroom is during our transition time. We know transitions can be hard for all ages of students, so often a quick mindful moment can be really impactful. I once worked with a school who had the Yoga for Classrooms activity cards posted in the hallways of their school so that when teachers were in that transition time, whether they were on their way to PE or music, or waiting for lunch to begin, or waiting to go outside for recess, or waiting for that final bell to ring, they could just spend that quick transition waiting time implementing a brief mindful moment. So some schools keep them on rings like this so they can be handy to just access at any time. Or, like I said, you could post them to walls, things like that, hallways. That is a great way to use these during transition times. Makes that period a little less disruptive and maintains some mindful approaches to what can be tough transition times. Other periods in the classroom where these can be helpful before taking a test, or if it's a really big, long test during a testing break. I know I had teachers that during the big state testing, when you're taking tests for hours and hours at a time, but you have breaks built in, they again would pull their yoga for classroom cards, do a couple of stretches, mindful moments, reset, rejuvenate, give your brain a break, but also in a way that is impactful and is allows us to be even more effective when we get back to the testing and back to the work we were doing before. Similarly, if you're doing a big writing project, a writing break, these activities can be really impactful at that time. After lunch and recess is another one of my favorite times to do yoga for classrooms. We have many of our activities that are perfect for that time right after lunch, whether it's because we're feeling kind of lethargic and need to be energized after a big lunch, or if we're feeling a little antsy, a little over energized following recess, then we have activities that can help calm, focus us for the rest of the day. So after lunch and recess, no matter what the mood is, we have tools for you. Like I said, we really like to be intentional at Yoga for Classroom. So if you notice your classroom is tired, drained, exhausted, maybe it's been a big day, then we have activities you can do to help energize. But then the opposite is true as well. If you're noticing a lot of distractibility, hyperactivity, that sort of thing, then we can do some activities to help us focus and do that. Another fun one, another time to do yoga for classrooms is as community building or celebratory. I talked to a teacher recently who did yoga for classrooms as a celebration to birthdays and things like that. So when it was someone's birthday or a special day for them, they got to pick the activities they did. So that gave them some voice and choice, also felt celebrated, and just a fun way to add that celebration into it. And lastly, a great way to use yoga for classrooms at that tier one in the classroom is at the end of the day. It's a great way to wrap up the day, especially if you add some of those reflective elements, thinking back on how the day was, what we did really well, what we're going to try to improve the next day. All of those elements, that is a really helpful tool as our young people learn how to connect what's happened to them to their behaviors and their choices and what we can do differently to make it even better. So great reflection tool to use at the end of the day. So those are some ways to use tier one support in the classroom using yoga for classrooms. However, there are some other tier one school-wide ideas I want to share with you. And these aren't just in the classroom, these are school-wide. So a couple of my favorites. First is school-wide announcements using yoga for classrooms. We did this at one of the schools I worked at as a school counselor, and it was really successful. So what we would do is we would just share one of the breathing techniques or one of the seated activities or one of the imagination vacation visualizations, whatever it was, we would just share one card each morning over morning announcements. It was quick, easy, didn't take more than a couple of minutes, but that way we knew the whole school learned that activity that day. It was a really good way to use the same language across the school. So for example, if today was a balloon breath over a morning announcements, and then I'm walking through the hall and I see a student who's really struggling and who is really having a tough time, I could say, "Oh, remember, we all learned balloon breath this morning. Do you want to practice it with me?" And we could spend a second practicing it. And you know that they had heard it because they heard the morning announcement. So that's a fun way to do a school-wide push of all of our mindful moments. Starts the day on a really positive way and can be really impactful for our students and our educators, right? Wouldn't you like to start your day with that brief mindful moment? It can be really helpful for all of us. Another school-wide approach are things like Mindful Mondays or something like that, where you really push the mindfulness activities on one day of the week. Now, of course, we want to be doing them all the time, but if we do something like Mindful Mondays, that can be when we celebrate our mindful moment. So if you can't do morning announcements every single day, could you have Mindful Mondays where you start the week and the day with some sort of mindfulness? And then you kind of emphasize that throughout the rest of the week, that one skill that you learned on Monday. Mindfulness clubs or yoga clubs can be impactful as a tier one school-wide approach too. If you're interested in learning more about that, I made a whole video about implementing yoga clubs at your school. So go check it out. Great support, really helpful, and students love it. So check that out as well. And let's see, last and final tier one idea to share with you that would be school-wide is to make bulletin boards or hallway decor focused on our mindful moments and on our activity cards. So you can do lots of fun designs, fun different themes and all of that, but the cards are a great thing to add to bulletin boards. They not only serve as a resource and a tool, but a good reminder of the mindfulness ideas that we've already learned. And it can help us again as adults too. When we see them in the hallways, it can be a good reminder. So, in summary, I hope these tier one supports are helpful to you. Remember, ideally, yoga for classrooms is meant to be implemented in our classrooms across the school, but we also have some ways that we can implement it school-wide, such as morning announcements or mindful Mondays or before and after school clubs or those bulletin boards. So let us know how you implement yoga for classrooms at tier one. We would love to hear from you. And as always, thank you for the work you do. It matters so, so much. And we are here to help if we can do anything to support your important work. Don't hesitate to reach out to Yoga for Classrooms for anything. We hope to see you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye.